Yes, a very good evening to you tuned into UBC TV. We thank you so much for following and we welcome you to this week's edition of UBC One-on-One with Michael Jordan Lukomwa. This time round, we are paying a visit to people with disabilities in this country. At least we have been with them, we are with them. We want to know what happens in their lives, how are they faring, and whatever is a challenge, we want to bring it out and let the world know and who has to handle it. We are going to talk to one of their members of parliament. Her name is the Honorable Laura KANUSHU. She's also the acting CEO of Legal Action for Persons Living with Disabilities. Honorable, we are so glad to have you.
Thank you.
How are you? The last time we talked, you were not an MP. How did this happen? How is Parliament? What does it feel to be honorable? And
well, Parliament is good. It's a good experience so far. And it feels good to be a member of Parliament. We
hear a lot of bad things about people in Parliament. Should we look at you in that way, or these are just lies?
I want to tell you that those are lies. There are no bad things in Parliament. There are only good things. Or maybe you only hear the bad things and you never get someone to tell you the good things.
Okay, we are told those people earn a lot of money and as their constituents suffer.
That is not true.
Really?
Yes.
You people earn very little money?
We earn very little money.
Sorry?
Yes.
Okay. We hear that vote by colleges has a lot of vote rigging. It's the real center of real politics. It's survival for the fittest. Are you one of those people that rig elections?
Yes, it's very true that college elections are very, very complicated, but also require a lot of money. And yes, there's a lot of rigging when it comes to college elections. And the reason is because you almost know your voters by name, by face, by district, by sub-county. So, and for us as persons with disabilities, it's a very, very hectic election and campaign because we campaign the whole country.
Yes.
Now, for me, I'm a national woman member of Parliament. So that would make sense that I have to go and campaign the whole country.
From Kisoro to Arua.
From Kisoro to Arua to Karamoja. I have been to every single district in this country during the campaign.
Your vote is expensive.
My vote is expensive. Now, it makes sense for me who is supposed to be a national woman MP. But also my colleagues who are not national MP, who are supposed not to be national MPs, had to go through the same campaign. So we have 5 members of Parliament and we all had to go through that.
Okay.
And yes, the rigging is there because in the past, some of our predecessors would not even go out there to campaign. They would wait for the people to come and vote because they always come to one place to vote for us.
So all you needed is carry some money with you?
Carry baskets of money, wait for the voters, give them, even when they haven't seen you, you have not told them your manifesto, you don't even know who they are, apart from having their lists and their telephone numbers, and then you give them money and they vote for you. But I want to say that this time, I didn't cheat an election, like you were asking.
I don't know why you're laughing about it.
Because, first of all, I didn't have the capacity to cheat. I didn't have the capacity to bribe voters, but also I am not the kind who believes in bribing voters. In 2016, I stood for the same position and I didn't win. And I accepted that I hadn't won. And that is not to say that there was no rigging, that there was no voter bribery. It was there. But I say to myself, and I said that persons with disabilities have made a decision. Whether that decision is because of money, I didn't want to know. I said, people have made a decision and they have not voted me as their leader. So I waited for another 5 years.
Okay.
And this time when I was doing my campaign, I was more or less sensitizing people. I wasn't so much saying, give me the vote, I'm going to do for you this, I'm going to do for you this. No. I only told people the situation of people with disabilities and said, are we happy about the situation? And then I came to the issue of money and I said, okay, you will come to Kampala or to Jinja and you will be given money by those who have the money. But is that what you want to see in the next 5 years? Are we going to be having leaders just because they have bribed us? Are we going to be voting for leaders just because they have given us 300,000, 200,000 and then go for the other 5 years without anything?
Is that how much they give them?
Even more.
Oh, I thought it's just that 300,000.
It could be 300, it could be 200, it could be 400, depending on the financial capacity of the contestant.
Of the person disbursing.
Yes.
Okay. Thank God you are in Parliament, yes, and we are watching. We are interviewing you at the beginning of your term.
Oh, yes.
At the end of the term, we shall come to do an appraisal.
Please, I will be waiting. I'll be waiting.
On behalf of those people that you represent.
Yes.
How would you describe the state of people living with disabilities in Uganda?
The state of people with disabilities in Uganda, I must say, is not good. And the reason I'm saying is not good is because statistics have shown that people with disabilities are the poorest of the poor. So if you're looking for people who are poor, the first, if poor people were to make a line here, people with disabilities will be first on the line.
Okay.
And that speaks volumes. And that means that a person with disability in this country lives on less than $1. But also we must understand that people with disabilities struggle in life more than their counterparts who have no disabilities. For example, they need extra help in whatever they do. And this cuts across all categories of disabilities. Whether you're blind, you need an extra person to help you. Whether you're deaf, you need someone to help you to communicate. Whether you have physical disabilities and you have your small market business down in the market, you will not carry those tomatoes like a woman who has their 2 legs and their 2 arms. You will need someone to carry for you that basket.
Yes.
And that comes with an extra cost. So, and also because historically people with disabilities have been looked at as people who are not productive, who cannot make it on their own, and therefore they have been pushed out of education, pushed out of employment. That's why the levels of poverty are so high amongst people with disabilities, more than any other group. And therefore, for me, the starting point is that once people are so poor, their situations cannot be good.
What explains the disparities? Because we have seen persons living with disabilities who are doing well. You find him with a stall full of merchandise, with a swarm of customers around him. You find him with a shop, you find him with a service, with clients. What explains the disparities that we have those that cannot afford anything, but again we have these that have tried and they are successful?
People with disabilities need family support. And I know that most of the successful people with disabilities have succeeded because their families have supported them. Once you grow up as a person with disability and you do not have the support from your family, that will be the end of you. And for you to catch up with life will take a bit of time. Now, also, in this government, people with disabilities have gone back to school. They have been recognized in all structures. And that speaks to what you're asking. That people with disabilities may not be the same as those who are here, maybe in the 70s.
Yes.
But that does not take away the fact that some of them are not yet at the stage or at the level where we want them to be. So the people that you're talking about, I know are very few who have their businesses and they're doing well. But I also know hundreds of people with disabilities who have graduated because of the affirmative action that the NRM government has brought. People with disabilities have studied. And I have a whole database of people, and that's not enough. My database is not complete. It's not conclusive. But I have a database of graduates of different faculties who have not even worked, who have not even had a chance to volunteer. Anywhere. For example, I began as a volunteer. I volunteered with a law firm. I volunteered for one of our members of parliament who passed on, and then I got into employment. But there are so many people with disabilities, with degrees, with diplomas, with masters, even with PhDs.
What keeps those ones behind?
The issue of employment for persons with disability is very, very crucial. And I know that unemployment cuts across. But again, when it comes to persons with disabilities, I was reading a report by the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development that was conducted by the Washington Group. And they said that 81% of women with disabilities have never been employed.
81%.
81%. And 69% of the men have also never been employed, and their chances of being employed are almost
not there.
Not there.
What explains that?
Number one is the attitude of the employers. I'll tell you that when I left law school, we were about 4 or 5 of us. And one of us, and I remember this story vividly, one of us, who was one of the brightest students we had in law school, went for a job interview at one of the law firms. And I won't mention because currently the owner of that law firm is a member of parliament. Okay. And when this gentleman appeared for the interview, because he had gone through the written interviews and now they were going for the oral interviews, so they had no idea that this gentleman was a person with disability. When he showed up and the panelists were seated on the table, one of them spoke in Luganda and said, "Katono mwale se wachi." So that's the kind of attitude that I'm talking about. When you walk into a place as a person with disability, whether you're blind or deaf or physical, albino, wheelchair, whatever disability you have, people close their minds. All they look at is the disability. They don't want to open up their mind to see, let's look at this person with albinism. How can they, add value to our company or to our organization? Or they're saying, this one is on a wheelchair.
Right away?
Right away.
They take the negative.
They take the negative. But also, because the law says that when you employ a person with disability, you as an employer, you have an obligation to give what we call reasonable accommodation. Yes. So it means that if I'm on a wheelchair and I want to work at UBC, and your UBC space is not accessible to me, UBC has an obligation to put up some facilities for me to be able to work just like any other.
Comfortably,
just like any other employee. Now, some employees are afraid of that.
Because it may be costly.
It may be costly. If you have to employ a deaf person, for example, you might have to have an extra cost as an employer to bring in a sign language interpreter so that that person can actually work on the same level with the rest of the employees. So those are some of the fears. Now, for me, as a person who represents people with disabilities,
yes,
what breaks my heart is the fact that the law talks about the private sector, and they give a quota to employers who employ people with disabilities. They give them a tax waiver. Some tax waivers. But my argument has always been, before government says, you private sector employ this person with disabilities, government must set an example.
In its agencies?
In its agencies, in public service. If you cannot set an example in public service and employ persons with disabilities, the private sector is not going to believe that people with disabilities can perform.
What do you think are those things government can do to ensure what you're talking about?
Number one, I think that government should be the first employer for persons with disabilities. And I had a chance, we had a chance as members of parliament to meet the president when we were at Chankwanzi. And we said, Your Excellency, why don't you give us a certain percentage in the public service for persons with disabilities? For example, give us 5%.
Mandatory.
So that every time the people in public service are employing, they know that this percentage is mandatory and must be going to persons with disabilities. And then test these people. And then we can go to the private sector, we can go to the informal sector and do other things. So I think that government must prioritize employment of persons with disabilities. Before they push to the private sector, they've got to set an example.
You've talked about the attitude of employers and the rest of the people. What is your view about the attitude about the members of the fraternity you represent? Don't they have that laid-back kind of belief, thinking that no one will employ me? Don't they have that kind of laid-back attitude?
I think those are just a few. If you ask me, Jordan, one thing I know about people with disabilities, and I'm a person with disability,
Yes.
is people with disabilities are, and when I was campaigning, I said I don't know that people with disabilities are lazy, that because life pushes you to work hard when you have a disability, whether you like it or not. Life will force you to work hard. And so I know that there are people who will sympathize, who have the self-pity and say, oh, who will employ me? But I know also that majority of people with disabilities have done so much to try and look for employment, and they haven't found it because of the reasons that we talked about.
Yes.
So those who are in the pity party are just a few of them. But they've not been given an opportunity to work. They've not been given an opportunity to work. And I know that, and we did tell the president in Chankwas, and we said, Your Excellency, try disabled people. Because we were complaining about how civil servants don't stay in offices. They come and put their jackets on the chair and they run away. They're all over the place. And one of the things we told the president was, people with disabilities, it has been proven statistically that they stay on the job longer than the non-disabled. You look at me. If I don't have a car, I have come maybe on a border, or a friend has dropped me at my place of work. When am I going to run around town? I can't. So is a blind person. So is a deaf person. Because everywhere you're going, you need help. So this is why I'm saying that
you will automatically concentrate.
You will concentrate, you will settle. More than the people who have normal legs, arms, eyes, ears. Those will be looking for other things. But for you, who has no... And because also people with disabilities understand that getting a job is not an easy task. And also retaining that job is not an easy task. So they concentrate more on their jobs more than their non-disabled counterparts.
This is a fraternity that has too much attention from government, civil society, churches, mosques, and all those people. Wherever you ask about their structures, they have some unit catering for that. What do you think goes wrong that we again end up seeing the challenges that you have mentioned?
Now, when you talk about like the churches, the mosque, the civil society, and this is what we are trying to maybe fight for lack of a better word. The churches, the mosques, and some of the civil society are looking at the charity model, what we call the charity model. And the charity model historically has been a person with disability needs tokens or tokenism. You know that there were places, and I know those places still exist, where they say Bakateyamba. So every time you see a mlema, all you're thinking about is, what can I give them? What do they need? Is it a shirt? Is it a trouser? Is it food? So the mentality that those institutions have is, this is someone who can't help themselves, who is not productive, and I can only give them something. And this is what we are saying, that we need to shift from the charity model to the social model.
Don't give them fish.
Don't give them fish. Take them to the lake and help them to fish. And this is the biggest problem. And you know, because look at the beggars on all our streets, majority of them are people with disabilities. And that's the mentality that people have, that, you know, Ibambi Omlema doesn't have arms, is blind, I'm throwing 2, 3, 4 coins in their hands and that's it, and God will bless me. So even when you're educated and you're blind, people still think
you need a coin.
Just needs a coin, or needs maybe a 50K to go and do something. And that's where we want to shift from.
How are we going to shift from that?
We will shift from that if the government and other institutions understand that people with disabilities can work, given the support that they require.
Because you see, that is a community kind of belief.
Yes.
Down from our villages up to here in town and wherever you will go. The coin mentality that you discourage.
Yes.
It's not only in town. Everywhere people think this person needs help. And that's how they look at him, that's how they look at them. How are we going to wash it out the minds of our people? Right from Kabera Maido, deep in Kisoro, down in Agago. How are we going to enable our people to come out and know that these are normal human beings that only may need a push, but they can be on their own?
You know, mindset change is not something you do in 1 day or 2 days. And that's where I think that government needs to do a lot of awareness about persons with disabilities. So there's need to do awareness, but there's also need to have the practical part of it. Like I said, employ a deaf person in one of the big institutions and see how they perform as government. That will send a signal to the people who think that a deaf person can't perform, for example. Employ a blind person and see how that person performs, and then send a signal to the people who still believe that, you know, what can a blind person do? So it's a two-way, but number one is the mindset change, and that takes a lot of awareness. It takes a lot of sensitization for people to understand that you can actually perform, you can actually do things that other people do. And I want to tell you, Jordan, that I'm not talking about people who are maybe ignorant or who have not gone to school. I will tell you that even now as a member of parliament, I can read people's body language, or I could read when we first came in, and people will just look at you and all they have is sympathy, which is okay naturally. But
you feel you don't need it.
I feel I don't need it, but also I was kind of surprised that, you know, even members of parliament can actually think like this. And maybe when you stand up to talk, they're like, Ngashi can't talk. I'm thinking now, how does my disability relate to, you know, talking? Because it has got nothing to do with that. But I want to say that even at the levels where we think people should be aware of these things, people are not aware.
You mentioned a number of challenges that members of the fraternity of PWDs face. First of all, what is the structure of leadership that we have in Uganda for this community?
Fortunately, and of course that's a tick for the NRM government, we have leadership of persons with disabilities in all the structures, right from the village to the parish, to the sub-county, to the district. People with disabilities have their structure. Up to the national level, the members of parliament.
Where you sit.
Where I sit.
How do we have you guys, right from the villages up to where you sit, and we again see problems, unemployment, mindset amongst the rest of us who are not part of the community, where these people are tortured, where these people are facing all these problems with you leaders at the LC1, LC2, 3, 5. Of what value are you if our people are still facing problems when we have you at all levels of leadership?
Let me first speak about the local levels.
Yes.
And that's where we have the biggest chunk of the leaders. And those are the people that vote for us, members of parliament. I must say that one of the reasons why we don't see a lot of results from the local leaders is because, yes, these local leaders are there, the structures are there, but have they been assisted to do their work? I don't want to use the word facilitation, because every time you talk about facilitation, people are thinking about money. But if, for example, I am a councillor and I represent disabled people at the district, is there a budget that allows me to go down to other persons with disabilities? And one of the challenges we are facing is the issue of budgeting. How much of the budget is going to persons with disabilities? If you're an LC1 and you're in a wheelchair and you're representing people with disabilities, you don't even have money to take you on a border and to go and speak to the community about, for example, the mind change that we are talking about, you will not perform. So this goes to the budget allocation. The persons with disabilities fall under the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development.
Yes.
We've now been given a specific department and a specific ministry. And our hope as members of parliament is that that department will be facilitated, will be given a decent budget. Because it is not enough to just have a minister. And yes, and I'm not saying that we're not proud of having a minister. I'm not saying that we are ungrateful. I am saying that we are happy about the department. We are happy about the minister. For the first or second time, we have a minister who is representing us in Parliament also, who is also a person with disability, which is a very big achievement.
Yes.
But we are saying on top of that, how do we enable her to do the work that she's supposed to do? But how do we also enable the leaders at the lower levels to do their work? Because if they are not enabled financially, they cannot do much. And someone will say, but also the other structures don't have the money. Maybe that's a question that someone will ask.
Yes.
But like I said at the beginning, if you're the LC1 at your village and you want to go to another village, you can get onto your bicycle and you go. But that won't happen for a disabled person.
Yes.
A disabled LC representative, for example, who is on a wheelchair, who is blind, who is on crutches. So the dynamics are different.
How do you want these people to be funded? Do you expect government to send money direct to the villages?
No, I think there has to be a specific budget for these leaders, because government should know, why do we have these leaders? What is their role? And if they define their role, then how does government enable these leaders
to play the role?
To play their role. Because just being a representative at the parish, for example, and I have nothing from government, is a big problem. Is a big problem, because how do I play my role as a leader at the local level if I am not facilitated by the government that I represent?
Let me talk to you about those that are facilitated.
I know where you're going, Jordan. You're welcome.
In that structure, there are those that are facilitated. We hear they give you fuel basing on how distant your constituency goes.
Yes, that's right.
Now, you that is a national female representative for these people, you must be having the fuel that would take you at least to meet these leaders, at least at the district levels. How much do you do as MPs to ensure that these people get at least some value, not for money, but value out of your their representation?
Yes, it's true. We get the fuel to go and visit our constituencies. And in our case, because we are all national members of Parliament, the 5 of us, yes, we have that budget. And we do try to go and see the people. But I can tell you, Jordan, it means that that fuel they're giving me will take me to every single district in this country. And how often I can go to those districts is a challenge. And that's why we are, of course, we blame our predecessors for leaving the law the way it is. So, for example, if you want to represent Northern Region, why do you have to campaign the whole country? Because look at other special interest groups like the youth, recently the older people, the older persons. The youth are representing regions. So there's a youth for North, for East, for Central, and then there's a woman representative who is national. That should have been the case for us, and that should have reduced on the burden.
How do you relate that with delivery of work?
I relate that with delivery of work because it's very, very difficult for me to move the whole country at the time when my people expect me to move. Because imagine if I was to move, it means the whole of my 5 term I'll just be moving.
You see, this is where things go wrong. You people move the whole country to find the votes.
Yes.
Why is it, again, hard when we start demanding for fruits?
Yes, but you know also the roles of a member of parliament. Moving is one of them because I have one of the roles is an oversight role. The oversight role is that I must make sure...
You see, when we start demanding,
yes,
those explanations come out.
Yes, they come out. And you know the campaign is a one-off. It's a one-off. Because, for example, maybe I took about 6 or 1 year during the campaign. 6 months maybe during the campaign. But now I am here for 5 years.
To do what?
To represent my people.
Exactly.
Now, one of the things that I must do as a member of parliament is to legislate. The other most important one is oversight. Oversight for me is crucial because I must make sure that all the government programs, people with disabilities benefit. For example, Emyoga. We had our report about Emyoga. And we had many flaws about people with disabilities not accessing MYOGA. Why? Because one of the conditions was you must have this amount of money for you to be able to access MYOGA. And our people didn't have that kind of money. So I must tell you that majority of people with disabilities did not benefit from MYOGA. Now we are going to the parish model. So as the current members of parliament, we must fight, and this is a fight, to make sure that people with disabilities benefit from the parish model. About
the fighting, how much do you fight as people representing people with disabilities? We have had the workers' MPs, especially these days. They're grappling around and running around with the NSSF bill and things like that. And we rarely hear MPs for people with disabilities pushing for anything or something.
Well, this is my first term, so I will not talk about the previous members of parliament.
But you prove me wrong if you have had any.
I think there's been some progress, really. I don't want to say that there hasn't. They may not be as assertive and as vocal as the other MPs, but I know that there are certain things that have happened because of the previous members of parliament.
Okay.
But I want to talk about the NSSF. I sit on the committee that is where the speaker has directed us to look at the
bill again.
The bill again. And one of the clauses that we are talking about is the 24A, I think 3, where the president recommended that it be deleted. And that touches on persons with disabilities. Because the clause was to the effect that once you're 45 and you're a person with disability, you can access up to 75% your mid-term savings or contribution. And he recommended that that clause be deleted because in his wisdom, and I agree with him, when you take 75% at 45, then what will you have at your old age?
This is 25, which carries actually.
Yeah. So I think, so what we have done is we are reintroducing that clause in a different way, and I don't want to preempt the report before it comes to the floor. But those are some of the fights that we fight behind the scenes that the media maybe doesn't see. So as a member who sits on that committee, I know I have done my fighting, but also my colleagues joined me and came to appear before the committee to defend what we want to see in the law. And we have given our justifications, we have given our statistics, why that clause should not be deleted, but reconsidered in a different manner. And I will not go into the details of that because I don't want to preempt what is going to come on the floor. But those are some of the fights that we're talking about. And I'll also tell you that Uganda has one of the best laws on disability. Those laws have been made by members of parliament who represent people with disabilities.
We wouldn't be complaining about the challenges they face.
Yes, and so implementation, is different. What we are grappling with now is the implementation of those laws and policies. But I can say that members of parliament, our predecessors, have done a great job in making sure that there is a good, or even one of the most wonderful legal framework for persons with disabilities in this country. And I remember when we were starting the legal action, most people used to come here to benchmark the laws on persons with disabilities. Now, implementation may not be necessarily the job of a member of parliament. And I don't think that...
No, but as an MP, under your oversight role, I think you have a responsibility to question why ABCD is not implemented as stipulated.
Exactly, and this is what I was telling you, that those are some of the fights we have that you people do not maybe hear, or you don't, when you don't see us rioting on the streets, you think we are not working as members of parliament.
A big number of your constituents are in the markets, are in retail businesses, on the streets and things like that. And local governments end up sometimes handling them in a way that is not pleasant. When you guys are in parliament and you're speaking good English, NSSF, those things that really don't reach them in the short run. Do you think about these guys and how can you play some role to see that they are helped? How do you effect some change within how local governments handle their businesses and their plight?
One of the things we're trying to push for, and when you say the English and the NSSF,
no, I just don't.
everything about a country revolves around the laws and the policies.
Exactly.
And if we don't make laws and policies that are favorable to persons with disabilities, we cannot argue anything out. And one of the things we are trying to push is if I am a market vendor, for example, and I'm on a wheelchair, should I be taxed like Jordan, who is not on a wheelchair? Is that fair? And
Is that the charity model that you were discouraging?
No, no. It's a tax waiver. For example, I was in Kenya recently attending the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. And one of the things I learned in Kenya is that there is a policy that all government tenders, these tenders you hear people fighting about, there is a percentage, specific percentage for people with disabilities. Automatically, you're giving people jobs, you're giving people business.
True.
We don't have it here. But also we are saying, while we are talking about the taxation, I already told you about the other costs. If I'm on a wheelchair and I have to go to the market, I have extra costs. Therefore, I should not be taxed as Jordan. I'm not asking for charity. I want to go and work on the same level with Jordan. But because I have this extra cost, and again you're taxing me, it is a big problem. I will give you another example.
Yes.
I had a friend who worked for UTL for the longest time. He's one of the best IT guys I've ever met. And he's lost his job. He's been on the street for over 10 years. So one time we were speaking about these extra costs. And he puts on calipers. Now calipers are they're like metals that you wear on your legs for you to be able to stand.
Yes.
And he told me one thing and he said, you see, what my employer doesn't understand is that I have to buy trousers at least every 2 months. Why? Because the calipers tear the trousers. Now for you, Jordan, you can wear your trousers for 2 years without buying.
Yes.
But those are small things that people don't look at. And that's why we are saying that as people with disabilities, the market vendors, those who have started small businesses, shouldn't there be a waiver on their businesses?
But that is not going to happen.
It is going to happen.
If you leaders don't come up to drive it.
That's why I'm saying we are pushing for it. Let me tell you, Jordan, it's not easy to touch on taxes. Because taxes is what sustains the country.
Fine.
So if you want to touch on taxes...
But what I know, every group will always pull for their interests.
Oh, yes. And this is what we are trying to pull.
That's what we expect to see.
And this is what you will see. But I must tell people that, and I must tell the persons with disabilities that you don't just wake up and stand on the floor and say you want a tax waiver as persons with disabilities. You must be very convincing. You must have people to back you up. We are only 5 amongst 500 and what? Is it 29?
Yeah, but with the sympathy you talked about at the beginning,
you know, sympathy,
I'm sure you can really mobilize.
Sympathy may not. Oh yes, we mobilize, and of course we. And I always tell the other members of parliament that, you know, each one of you has these people in their constituencies,
if not in their families.
If not in your families, and so representing people with disabilities is for us to remind you, but you should also be alive to the fact that in your communities there are people with disabilities. And as a member of parliament who doesn't want to leave anyone behind, you should be seen to say, I am inclusive. I care about the women, I care about the youth, I care about people with disabilities. So these are some of the things that we are grappling with. And also, for example, now with the parish model. We're insisting and saying, yes, the president said, ring fence for women. But we're saying, yes, Mr. President, ring fence for women, but also ring fence for people with disabilities. And for me, my argument has always been, there is no poor person or poorer person than a person with disability. So if you're looking out for the most vulnerable, you must start with people with disabilities. This is what I said on the floor during the NABA in Germany. I said, okay, people are struggling to define the word vulnerability. People are saying this is for people who are vulnerable. And I understood what they meant by vulnerable. That they were saying people who have lost their jobs and are not working. But I was also saying that among those who have lost their jobs, for example, in the markets, like
they are my own.
They are my own. And those, the Prime Minister should start with those. Because in her category of vulnerable, those are the most vulnerable. For example, the people at the parkyard, you know, parkyard is full of disabled people. That's where they work from. So if you're giving out the 100,000 and you're looking at market people, who should you start with? The people with disabilities.
But in the markets you're talking about, there are those who are people with disabilities, but they own 5 stalls and they don't need that.
I haven't seen those, Jordan. I don't know why you saw them.
Really?
Yes.
There are so many of them doing well, actually. In
yes,
business.
they're there. But I am also saying that even at that level,
yes,
if you're going to give money, the 100,000, for example,
even that one needs it.
Even that one needs it.
That is selfishness.
That is not selfishness, Jordan. Let me tell you why. You know, when some people lost their businesses, I have many friends who lost their small businesses. I said, for me, let me go and do bricklaying, for example. Let me get my items, which I was selling in the shop, which is now closed, and move and hawk, kutembea, and kutembea my products. A person with disability cannot kutembea. They were rotting with their products in their homes. That's what makes the distinction. And these are very, like I talked about the guy of the calipers, it is something that does not occur to anyone. Even me, who thinks I know so much about disability, it had not occurred to me that that friend of mine needs to replace his trousers almost every 2 months. So it's the same thing that, yes, I might be a prominent business person who has a disability, but now we are closed down, we are not working. My chances of surviving will still be less than the person who can go and make books.
Do you have an agenda as MPs representing these people? Do you have those things that you're looking at least you must score in these 5 years as we wind up?
Yes, and I must say we have our caucus. We have our caucus where we sit every first Monday of the month. Our chairperson is the Honorable Alex Ndezi, and the rest of us are on the executive, but also we have our minister who hosts us most of the time, and we thank her for always
good enough you're only 5.
Yeah, we're always 5. And we have our agenda.
Yes.
But our first agenda, and which for us speaks to the rest of the things that I was speaking about, is economic transformation
of PWDs.
Of PWDs. Once we hit that, the rest is not so...
In just a second, so what are the details there?
The details there is that, first of all, we are saying government must be intentional about persons with disabilities in their programs, including the parish model now, because whether people like it or not, the parish model is going to come, it's going to be the way to go. But we must make sure that the parish model does not leave out a person with a disability. All the other government programs, for example, in education, we have the loan scheme for people who are going to universities and other tertiary institutions. People with disabilities must get their share.
Let's talk about legal action for PWDs.
Okay, so Legal Action for Persons with Disabilities is a non-government organization, and we are a legal aid service provider. This organization was started in 2005. It was started by a team of lawyers with disabilities, and I'm one of them. One of our colleagues has since passed on, and my other colleagues are still here. And this organization was started by us at that time to provide legal aid to persons with disabilities. One of the other challenges that people with disabilities face is that when they have cases, they cannot afford the services of a lawyer. And so
you guys come in.
We come in to fix that gap.
For free?
For free, because legal aid is free. So once you have a case and you need a lawyer, we will give you a lawyer for free. And we've done this since 2005. I think we're in more than millions of cases that we have done. And the other thing that we also do is about legal education, sensitizing the public about policies and laws that touch on persons with disabilities. But also, we sue people who do not comply with the laws. For example, we've done 2 big cases, which we call the public interest cases. We've done a case on access to the physical building, and this is still a big challenge. The law since 2006 has been talking about every public building must be accessible to people with disabilities. So we realized that people were not complying, and we went to court and we sued KCCA and we sued so many other institutions. Then we also did a case on political participation. And we were still fighting this whole thing of Why do I have to go through the whole country looking for votes if I want to represent one region? And also we had another issue about previously the elections of people with disabilities were not being handled by the Electoral Commission.
Okay.
They were being handled by the National Association. So we said, no, Electoral Commission, this is your business, please do your business. Don't push it to a non-government organization. And we achieved at that level. We are yet to achieve at the level of having people not to move the whole country, those who don't intend to.
Okay, thank you so much. As we wind up in just a second, a message to that person living with disability watching you as we wind up.
I want to appeal to all persons with disabilities, and especially the leaders at the local level, that please keep your eyes open, keep your ears open to every single government program, and make sure that people with disabilities are not left out. And I want to say this not just as me, as Laura, but on behalf of my colleagues in Parliament, because I know that we are working as a team, that we are committed to the things that we talked about, and we are committed to making sure that people with disabilities benefit from these programs, government programs especially. Should you have any challenges down there, let us know. Let us know so that we can back you up, so that we can give you the support. Give us the information, engage us as much as you can, so that at the end of the day you don't think, oh, the MPs are not doing this. Sometimes MPs are not doing this because they don't have the information. And the information should come from down and comes to us. So I want to appeal to the people with disabilities to make sure that no government program leaves you out. If you hear of any government program and you're not quite sure, you don't have the information, give us a call, give us a text and say, I'm hearing about this. How can you advise me?
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Honorable Laura KANUSHU Opori, she is a member of Parliament representing people with disabilities. We had to give out this 1 hour to the plight of people living with disabilities, to know how they are faring and show these leaders that we care about what they do and we are watching. So we'll get back to her or one of her colleagues at the end of the 5 years to do an appraisal. My name is Michael Jordan Lukomwa with Davis Kamukama and Kenneth Tanawa. We wish you the best of the night.